Broadcasting live from our New England studio, Solutions Review is proud to showcase Druva in the Solution Spotlight, an inside look at enterprise technologies.
I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and welcome to the Solution Spotlight featuring Druva, and focused on strengthening Microsoft 365 security for cyber resilience. According to the Microsoft Digital Defense Report of 2024, human-operated ransomware attacks have surged by nearly 3x, a clear warning that today's threat landscape is more aggressive, more targeted, and more persistent than ever. As organizations deepen their dependence on Microsoft 365, Entra ID, and Dynamics 365, your data becomes increasingly distributed and vulnerable. Without the right protection strategy, growing cloud ecosystems often introduce blind spots that leave you open to data loss, compliance breaches, and operational downtime. So today, we will shine our spotlight on key protection gaps and how to close them, and why SaaS-based protection is essential for ransomware defense and compliance. And joining us to walk you through the presentation from Druva today is Vanessa Tovis, Solutions Architect, and Stephen Duff, Director of Product Marketing. Vanessa, Stephen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Well, this is great. I know Druva has entered into a partnership with Microsoft to deal with this very issue back in the spring. And I also know, and was kind of blown away by this, that there are 400 million Microsoft 365 users worldwide, which we're certainly using it here at Solutions Review. So couldn't be more timely. It's an amazing topic and quite frankly, an amazing opportunity. So very much looking forward to the presentation today. Before we get to that, however, I will set everybody's expectations that we'd love to have a Q&A after. And if you have any questions, by all means, submit them to us through the chat function, and we will gather them up all here. And after Stephen and Vanessa are all done, I will jump back in and we'll have a little bit of a rapid fire question and answer period. But otherwise, Stephen, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll catch up when you're on the other side.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, hi everyone. Great to be here today, and looking forward to speaking to you a bit more about Microsoft 365. And like Doug mentioned, delighted to be joined by my good friend Vanessa Tovis here. Again, just to let you know, again, we've done a few of these together, me and Vanessa, and again, she's got more knowledge in Microsoft than I'll ever have. So again, it's really useful having this resource with us today. So yeah, looking forward to this, Vanessa.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen. Yeah, it's actually really great it was interesting to hear mention of the Digital Defense Report, because as we are speaking at so many of these regional events, Microsoft events, and even the B-sides, it is rare that you have someone who does know or has even heard of the Digital Defense Report. So fundamental to our conversation today.
Absolutely. And so we're going to get started today. And again, we're going to jump into a little bit just about who Druva are, just in case anyone hasn't heard of us before. So Druva is essentially a 100% SaaS solution that's designed to give you end-to-end data protection and cyber resilience across all your IT environment. So everything from SaaS to cloud, data centers, and endpoints. So it's this unified platform to bring together all your data protection and cyber resilience needs, but getting the value of SaaS and cloud with that as well. So again, you might want to start with a single workload and then add more as you progress. But specifically today, we're going to focus on things like Microsoft 365. We'll touch on Entra ID, and also things like Microsoft Dynamics 365 as well. And when it comes to what we do and how we're working with our own customers, at the moment, we've got around 4,000 organizations that are relying on Druva to protect their Microsoft data. And again, the majority of those customers are using us to protect Microsoft 365, all the kind of standard applications within that product as well. But as I mentioned, this can also extend to things like Dynamics 365 and Entra ID and all your Microsoft Azure resources as well. So things like Azure VMs, your Azure SQL, and your Azure Blob as well. So what we're going to talk about today is how this is actually more than just backup now, and why it's important to maybe reconsider what you've been doing and what you should be doing in the future, especially when it comes to cyber response and recovery, but also for things like e-discovery and compliance. So let's jump into this today. And Vanessa, let's start with what we are seeing and what we hear from customers on a regular basis in terms of how customers now are maybe facing more obstacles than they may realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Early on in the life of Microsoft going into the cloud, right, with first Exchange and then SharePoint, the platform itself was always changing. You would come in the next day and something would be different, right, as it's developing. And the reality to the Microsoft development and the platform itself is it is built by humans. And as always, right, they oftentimes can introduce issues. I think the last one that I recall very specifically was what appeared to be an issue on the partner platform, right, the partner portal, but really it wasn't. When you actually dig down and look at the details of the vulnerability, what it was a vulnerability introduced by Power Apps, right, when they deployed Power Apps. So cycles of patching by Microsoft because they manage the infrastructure, right? In the shared responsibility mode, customers manage the data. They're responsible for the data. Microsoft is responsible for the infrastructure and the platform itself. So by all means, the vulnerabilities that are introduced by the nature of that development, criminals that they're savvy. They're doing things, and the Microsoft's cloud data is a lot more of a target today than it ever was, and it will continue to be so. Data loss, these are things that, very early on, like 5 years ago when I came to Druva, I was having these conversations, right, about how there's certain buttons that when you press in 365, there's no undo, and it doesn't land in the recycle bin. So there's natural data loss that use cases of the platform were not designed for. And today, the user data and the user data footprint is, you have to look at it holistically beyond, you have to look at things like how configuration matters. Most people don't know. The majority of the time, your Exchange Online is configured to store your attachments in OneDrive, right? Which means without OneDrive, your email is not whole. So there's a lot of aspects that customers are faced with. They oftentimes just, they just either don't know or they're focusing maybe on one particular aspect of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it kind of ties it together in terms of some of the things we mentioned at the start is when you bring all this together and some of these challenges, what we see now is that the Microsoft data you have is under attack more than ever.
Correct. It is. And, statistics, we really don't have to look very far. We really try and get most of our data from Microsoft reporting, Microsoft security reports. So oftentimes a lot of this data comes from, that you see out there comes from Microsoft. So.
Yeah, I think that first one there is just shows you the kind of scale that these things are happening at as well. I mean, 600 million on a daily basis actually shows you how good a job Microsoft are doing. But these things, they do start to escalate. And again, we're going to touch on how we can sort of talk about this and how we can address these going further. But again, bringing it back to what Doug mentioned at the start, and arguably one of Vanessa's favorite pieces of content that lives out there is the Microsoft Digital Defense Report. And Vanessa, do you want to touch on this in a bit more detail and just kind of talk about the background of this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. The Digital Defense Report's released usually every October, and last year was the 5th year. What you'll find it is absolutely part marketing, right? Talks about the products that they have, the licenses, but it also really highlights the threats that they'd faced the prior year and what they were doing to thwart those, right? So when you look at things, and especially, we'll really frame this around Microsoft 365, because of course the threats go beyond just that data. The story is very straightforward. Customers are using AI. They're starting to invest in Copilot, but also these criminals are also using AI. They're using AI to make the target smaller, right? Which means they're trying to avoid detection. And when I go speak at these B-sides conferences, those are the regional security conferences.
Mhm.
They're the ones that are talking about a dwell time of the high 100 days, like 180 to 230 days. So when these criminals, during that time, there's a lot that these criminals are doing, right?
Yeah.
They're harvesting these credentials, they're starting to change things on the back end, and then they're creating these tenants in Microsoft, right? Microsoft has tried to, had over the last year, really clean up a lot of tenants, especially these developer tenants. But
Mhm.
these criminals are actually putting malicious files in SharePoint because they know they can, right? They understand this platform probably just as well as I do,
Mhm.
but they kind of use that to go a little different direction. But once they drop those files in SharePoint, they get the links to those files, and then they attack other Microsoft Teams users. So not only is the data in the tenant under attack,
Mhm.
but also the tenant itself is being used as part of an attack. Right. So the digital defense report, it definitely highlights a lot of things that we need to keep our eyes on. We need to understand what is involved, right? What's at stake here. So.
Yeah, and I think a bit of advice for anyone who is on today is like, please go and sort of search this out for yourself, because it's a really useful piece of content that can be shared internally as well. So please check that out. And I think it's quite timely as well. Like you mentioned, all these things are highlighted in the defense report, but we talk about all these different types of attacks, and what we're seeing now is how some of these attacks are pivoting from the traditional target and just the endpoint, and now maybe moving towards the cloud and hybrid cloud environments. And this is a more kind of recent example that we've seen, and the kind of Storm 0501 threat actor here. So Vanessa, do you want to touch on this and how this is showing the sort of progression of these attacks going forward?
Yeah, as Microsoft, companies like Microsoft, right, these platform owners are trying to really implement and utilize more security, native security in there. These criminals are going to try to come in from every way, right? Typically, you'd find it was like a malware on the laptop, desktop. In this case, that wasn't the case, right? They harvested, they bought credentials, stolen credentials from another. I don't even know what they're. It's not ransomware as a service, but basically they steal credentials, and so they got these credentials, they entered in, and their path of attack went both to the endpoint, like stretched all the way down to the endpoint, the user data on the laptop, desktop, and even into the cloud, right, into the OneDrives. So you're having to protect more than just your perimeter, more than just the laptop, more than just your cloud data. And right, this is where it ultimately doesn't matter where the attack comes in. Is at the end of the day, what are they doing to the data? These guys very specifically um, read sensitive data on the laptop, desktop, right? Same thing in the cloud data. Then they encrypted data, and they used that in a double encryption, or sorry, I think it's called double encryption attack. Um, and right, and held their customers at ransom. I mean, it's like, hey, that's what they're trying to do. Not only are they disrupting the flow of business for these customers, but they're also seeking their financial gains from it. But we have to really look at the details of what they did to data, and that's where Druva really kind of focuses our efforts, is in understanding how are we going to help you get that data back. But we have to know what these criminal organizations are doing to our data.
Yeah, and I think when we look at that sort of data footprint as well, and we talk about the sensitive data in there, and again, this does show that they're shifting from on-premise ransomware endpoints to more of these cloud-based tactics. And again, Vanessa, do you want to touch on some of these in a bit more detail in terms of the type of things that are happening here?
Yeah, I think in this we have to also, this is what I mentioned, the consideration of the user data footprint. So my data for me as an individual in an organization is on my laptop, it is on my OneDrive, it is in my email. Those are the core fundamental storages for where companies allow users to have data that they create, or right. And with that, we have to see what these criminals are doing, which is they're looking for sensitive data. And we have to realize that even if you use OneDrive, right, your company may use OneDrive, that doesn't mean that your employees, your users aren't saving something locally. I mean, you go into an email and you click download to read something, right? Someone downloads a file. That data is sensitive data. And so if you have no mechanism of enforcing maybe your policies of that, uh, they're still going to end up saving data, and some of which could absolutely be sensitive. In 365, right, there are purview features that allow you to tag data, whether based upon sensitivity. And a lot of that is dependent upon, one, your license, two, the configuration, right? Whether whether those assets are labeled manually or dynamically, um, and your enforcement of that. So, but we have to look at truly the impact to this data, and with that being encryption, because Microsoft always also, right, talks about, and I think we have this maybe in our next slide, what happens to the data in these attacks with encryption very specifically. So.
Yeah, and kind of nice lead into this as well, is like tying it back to what we said at the start, is again, backups do really matter for Microsoft 365. And again, they're more important now than just having the backups for the sake of it. It's actually the value you can get from these, and it's providing more and more sort of use cases to be built on top of these backups as well. So traditionally it was just, okay, we need something for operational recovery. But again, what we're seeing here is the different types of use cases that we're trying to solve for here, for organizations where they're looking to solve some of these challenges that we've highlighted in the defense report. And again, Vanessa, from your experience, you want to kind of bring in what you're hearing out there as well, and from speaking to people and attending these type of speaking sessions as well.
Yeah, this really does identify some of the core and critical things, and really, in some cases, lack of collaboration. What I mean by that is that there are legal requirements, there are compliance requirements, there are cyber requirements of recovery, and there are everyday, requirements from. So an organization has more need of that data protection above and beyond that of a cyber incident. I mean, oftentimes we really focus on that because that's what's happening. But the use cases, once again, of data loss, and what's native to the platform, right? What comes with your E3 or your E5, and the fact that even with those E3 and an E5, you don't get a different platform between that. You just get maybe additional storage and additional features, um, but it doesn't change the fact, certain things. So with organizations, especially as an organization grows and you have more formal departments like risk management that help to drive compliance, or even the needs of legal hold very specifically. Right, organizations are looking and facing different things. Legal hold very specifically, I think, has more impact of the simple question of what do you do with user data when they leave the organization, and you have to maintain that data for X number of years, right? For whether it's legal cases or just in compliance in general. So yeah, there's a number of needs across the board for data protection. So.
Yeah, and I think just tying it back to one of the things we mentioned earlier as well is around the shared responsibility model. And again, there's still a lot of people out there that just believe that Microsoft have everything protected for you. But again, as you mentioned, they're responsible for protecting the infrastructure itself, but not the data. That's on you as a customer. So all the things we can see on the screen here, things like accidental or malicious deletion, ransomware, deleted user data, that's all on you as a customer. You need to ensure you have something in place to mitigate for all of these things. So it's a really important piece. And again, it's more than just a backup. And because of that, we were sort of chatting internally, is that how can we get this across to organizations? How can we make them understand this as well? And I think it was around about a year ago now, Vanessa, where we introduced this idea of our cyber resilience maturity model here at Druva. And what this did was try to highlight for organizations where their potential gaps might be within their cyber resilience strategy. And what we've got here, and you can see on screens, is we introduced this model with 5 different levels. And the idea here was to help organizations try to increase their cyber readiness. And by looking at each of these different levels, you ask yourself, as an IT team or as an organization, do you have the ability to implement all of these different levels? Like, what would you do in these scenarios? Can you do it? Is there gaps here? And I think what this did was it's been really good because it's made people think in a different way. Instead of just having a conversation and say, hey, are you taking backups? Somebody says yes. It's not just about the backups, it's about clean recovery, which we're going to come on to in a bit more detail further on here. But from your point of view, Vanessa, what do you think's been the value of this in terms of having these initial conversations?
I think that's the word, conversation. It's rare that we have any, our conversations with customers just be about, do you back up do you back up OneDrive? That's really no longer the case. And we find that customers kind of can come to us at different places. So it's also helpful for us to understand where they are and how close they are to being able to be, in their cyber readiness. So visually, it helps because we start the conversation of, this is what our customers are aiming towards, right? In our history of working with organizations large and small, there is this natural progression, and we just need to know where they are, what are their goals, right? Where do they need to be, and who is actually, what data that they need throughout this recovery. So I think that I've found that it's aided in the conversation because oftentimes it's easier for people they're more visual in general. So this sparks really great conversation about not just data protection, but data resilience.
Yeah, and I think, again, we're going to chat through some of these in a bit more detail here, but I think the first one is just about, obviously, like modern data protection, coping with some of these different challenges that we've seen. And at a very core level, what you need is something that's going to be fast, immutable, and resilient when it comes to your backups. And again, Vanessa, do you want to talk us through just what we mean by that and why there's value here for organizations?
Yeah, I mean, the immutability aspect becomes extremely important. Microsoft has this documentation on their website about a systemic identity attack, right? Which means you're completely locked out. These criminals in the 200 days, 230 days that they were in there doing their reconnaissance, they press their button, and now you and your team are locked out. And that means they have control over your production data, but you need to have a mechanism, a backup, right? That says whatever they do, and whenever we get our tenant back, we will be able to utilize that data. They won't be able to touch it because it doesn't live and it's not controlled under the same plane as our production data. And organizations have dealt with that for many years, but most of the time, right, in the on-prem world, they had their own storage, so they backed it up locally, and then but even those backups that were local became part of an attack checklist. I think in one of the digital defense reports in 2022 was the first time Microsoft reported it was like 99% attempt to attack the backup. So you have to have, if you are backing up your data, you need to have an immutable copy of that data, which means no one can touch it. And that you also have to have features in your own or your platform that can assure an organization if you are attacked. And that attack is your credentials. It's your compromise of a credential. We have mechanisms to protect that data built into our platform, right? So that's the actual immutability of that.
Nice segue to the next slide here. And because I think you raise a good point. Yeah. It's about the backups are great. They need to be immutable. They need to be air gapped, but you also need to have the same sort of resilience for the actual backup environment itself. And again, you can see here just from some of the capabilities we have, what we call at a platform level, and the configuration that you have as a user that you can implement to add more sort of security to that platform to make sure that the backups are safe there as well. So Vanessa, I know you like this slide as well. So do you want to touch on this in a bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. The first slide that you saw was about Druva and Druva's platform, right? So that we protect things beyond Microsoft 365, absolutely. Cloud resources like Dynamics and Salesforce and Google Drive, Google Email, but also in more of the enterprise workloads like AWS workloads or even Azure workloads. So the fundamental aspect is you have to have a core architecture that treats all of those workloads and provides all of those workloads that same level of security, right, at a platform level. But then organizations, not all organizations are the same, which means they need to be able to configure their Druva backup, their Druva environment, to match what they need, whether it's retention, whether it's some aspect of security. Very interestingly enough, you'd think that having all these pieces of security that everyone would use them, and that's not the case, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes the smaller the organization, the less that they utilize features like geofencing. Our larger organizations tap into every mechanism that they have to secure that data. I'm not saying that not that all small companies don't do that. I'm just saying, right? But having these features, being able to configure SSO and use SSO while also having a break glass account, right? Being able to have every single audit trail of what an admin did as well as a user. And these audit trails become extremely important even from a compliance perspective. So early on, when I first got here, they were just rolling out, Druva was just rolling out and starting to change things like how we process a download. So if I have the right with our RBAC to download, which I can control who can do that, right? That's part of the security mechanism. And if I do download a user's mailbox, every one of those things will generate, you can generate a PST. We no longer just generate a PST on the fly. What we're doing is we're taking that PST, scanning that PST for any malware, and then we're generating that as a zip file. And we're holding that, and it's attached to the log. So not only have we heard our customers say we need that log, but we've heard our compliance departments say we need to know what that user downloaded, right? What did that admin download? So many use cases that drive these mechanisms of security and control and retention, and to ensure that that data is not just there, but it's accessible to those who the organization deems needs to see them, right? Different segregation of users, where like Stephen and I might have access to, Stephen might have access to everything, but I only have access to 5 out of 5,000 employees, something like that. But that's the flexibility that you have to have from a configuration perspective, because not all companies manage the same. So,
yeah, I think kind of leading on from this as well is that we talk about having the benefit of isolating your backup environment and your backups from production. And I think this slide here is a really nice way of highlighting the potential impact that has in your organization if those core credentials are compromised. And again, do you want to just talk through this for us, like this knock-on effect and what it means for your organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the threat actor, right, that Storm 0501, is a perfect example of that. I mean, that was just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, Microsoft wrote on that. It doesn't matter where the compromise enters your environment. It could be endpoint to cloud, cloud to cloud, right? Cloud to your local network. Very specifically, it is in this world of SSO, right? SSO, I think maybe we all know that it originated because organizations were starting, they had too many tickets about resetting passwords. Let's be honest, like that's the origination of that. And then it became more of an absolutely a mechanism of security. But now in this world where you have the potential for your environment, your SSO and those credentials compromising, you have that ability to reach into whatever you're connecting to SSO. That's the reality of these accounts, right? And the management and the integration. So you look at Siemens. Siemens had customers who had deletions of devices, right? That was like a year ago. ServiceNow, exfiltration, Microsoft 365, data, right? OneDrive, SharePoint, deletions, encryptions. So that exposure and that that compromise of a credential has an impact. So you have, even with your backups, like what Microsoft was reporting, 99% attempt to attack. So when you have this type of integration, and you have this, the world of Entra, and I'm using this account, my admin account, to access other things, you have some exposure that you have to plan for. And that also means you have to plan for what your vendors are doing. And I think that might lead us to possibly our next slide, right? Of the acts and the actions that your vendors that interact with you, what their responsibility is to you to say that I'm pulling data out of your tenant, out of your environment. This is how I'm going to secure your data. So.
Yeah, because it's actually when we're talking here about like what you've mentioned here about the issues of ransomware and sort of compromised credentials, and what it's leading to now in terms of backup is a lot more complex recoveries, because what you're looking for is not just the ability to restore a backup, it's making sure that you can actually restore clean data in a sort of time sensitive fashion. And Vanessa, I know this is something you're passionate about as well, is actually talking about the importance of time sensitive data versus just sensitive data as well.
Yeah, I think we've all heard about sensitive data, right? There's even, right, there's policies and compliances that organizations have to have in place to see who can access sensitive data. But that word time sensitive is not often brought up in our conversations enough. So as a solutions architect, I would go build solutions for engineering companies, construction companies, legal firms, right? And when organizations kind of bought into this world of Microsoft 365, they also started investing in building solutions. So they're replacing manual processes that their organization is dependent upon, but they're also moving time-sensitive data and assets. So I'll use the project one, right? That had a construction company, and they would spend months and countless resources building a bid package. This is just one example. And that bid package is due on Monday, next Monday, right? It's a hard date. If they miss that 12:01 p.m. Submission, they're done. So all of that investment and their future revenue that they're hoping to gain from that, right, is really dependent upon them delivering that bid package on time. And that means that data has to be clean. So if, as an organization, if I have no backup and we have been attacked and that data has been encrypted, deleted, modified, whatever it may, right, altered, what do I have to deliver? I'm going to have to go through every single one of those assets, and hopefully I have everything I need for that bid package, right? And this kind of comes to that concept of also Microsoft, I think it was the first reporting of this, was a 16% pairing. So we have to understand the impact of what these criminals are doing to the data. There's a pairing of encryption and exfiltration, right? So, and we also look at that over a period of time, that encryption isn't just like a big sledgehammer, that it's can be little encryptions over time. And when you look at that, there is not necessarily just any one prior point of time for an entire organization that they could recover to if they had backup. So Druva introduced this, and I think we have this maybe on our next slide, Stephen, right? Oh, maybe not. Oh yeah, we do. This is it. So we introduced this feature, and we started it on the laptop desktop of the curated snapshot. And it's about recovering the right data, right? What I mean is the last known good clean file. So I can pick a window of time, and within that window, our customers can pick a window of time that says, I want to look, right? Our security team says, let's look between this period of time, and I'm going to say 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And we're going to look at every snapshot, and we're going to build a snapshot that never existed. And it goes and finds at a file level the last known good clean file, right? Restoring what's right versus restoring just to a prior point. This is the type of difference that, for years, Druva was a visionary in the Gartner quadrant, right? For years. Now we are a leader. And that's because we listened to our customers. We understood the challenges, and especially the challenges of the data, what the data was facing. So the curated snapshot is something extremely unique, and that in a class of an organization that Druva is in, right, we're considering more than just, can I recover a file? It's, can I recover the right file, right? So
Yeah, and I think there's a nice sort of visual here on how we can explain this to people as well to help you understand what this really means for you. And again, Vanessa talked about this. It's about getting clean data, but what it does is it's saving you time and, again, a lot of man hours within the organization, because previously you would have to try and do this manually. And as Vanessa's highlighted, a lot of the cases where this has been going on over a long period of time, where they start sort of impacting data for a number of days. We talk about the dwell time. So you might have to go back maybe like 100 or 200 days to find the last known complete snapshot that has clean data. And I mean, I don't think any organization can rely on data from 200 days ago.
yeah,
Part of a kind of ransomware strategy. So what this really does, you can see here, is like Vanessa mentioned, trying to grab the last known good file before corruption, and then creating this new version of a snapshot that never existed before into this single curated snapshot. So it's minimizing that data loss. And again, it's doing it in the speediest way possible for you to get back up and running. So
and yeah, that's perfect. And if you think about, Stephen, that example I gave of that bid package for a construction company, right? It could be a mergers and acquisition package, right? It's the same thing, is that they have to be able to rely upon this data that they're given back. And if they are given a snapshot, that's to a prior point, generally what will happen is they're going to start creating tickets. Hey, this file is not, this file is bad. So that help desk admin is going to have to go hunt either for a file or to a different point of time. And that will continue until the user believes they have everything. That, there's no mechanism in SharePoint or OneDrive or on your laptop or desktop that says, yep, everything's good. It's like it was before. So this is what we're doing. It's that recovery of the right data. So
yeah, and I think it's, again, when you consider what you have in your IT environment now, we talked about all the different type of workloads that we protect, but obviously every organization now has a number of integrations that they work with alongside their data sets as well. So again, we're going to highlight a couple here just specifically around sort of Microsoft Sentinel and Security Copilot, and how using Druva and these integrations as well, how you can add more cyber resilience to your infrastructure to try and defeat some of these cyber threats as well. So again, these are fairly recent updates that we've made, Vanessa. So can you just talk us through exactly what we're doing here as well?
yeah, not everyone subscribes to everything Microsoft, but there are organizations that by all means use Sentinel and in their security posture, right, in their management. So being able to ingest all of our logs from all of our workloads, being able to ingest alerts that identify, what objects, and allowing that data to interact with Sentinel. That was a huge part of our commitment when we really did it. A part when we started heading down more of a strategic partnership with Microsoft was to say, okay, how are we going to provide this data to you, to your customers that do this? Of course, backing up Azure and backing up workloads in Azure and backing Microsoft 365 and Dynamics. So part of our commitment to Microsoft as a partner for theirs is to invest in that, to where their customers need to use this data. So you back up your data with Druva, and all of those key pieces of information can be ingested into your Sentinel. So.
Yeah, and I think this is really part of the broader play we have here. And again, we talked about backup, with the importance of that, and we talk about clean recovery as well. But it's also about what you can do to try and stop this at the source as well. So using things like AI and ML to help with threat detection and try and find out these data anomalies early as possible. And we talk about incident response. How fast can you respond to an incident once you've been aware of it as well? So Vanessa, again, incident response is something you've spoken about an awful lot, but in terms of the data anomalies, can you just talk us through this and how this really helps to streamline investigations as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Organizations, they invest in licenses. They invest in licenses for collaboration and also Sentinel, and they might also be investing in licenses for like CrowdStrike to monitor your endpoints, your laptop desks, right, your devices. But there's no data anomalies. So there's alerting on like user behavior in 365. I can create that. That's called like things like the impossible travel. Vanessa logged in Jacksonville, Florida, and 5 minutes later she logged in from Sydney, Australia. Not possible. What Druva has built and what we started building once again, right? We started building this on the endpoint with our endpoint data protection, the user data, and then formalized that, made that a better product, and then really expanded that to all of our workloads. But it's what the data is telling you, right? Every user has a profile of what their data does. Like I'm a creator of content, so I create something, I work on it for a little while, and then I probably don't touch it, after I deliver it. I might maybe bring it up in a year from now, but ultimately that profile of data can and should be used as a signal, right? This is where data anomalies of what Druva is doing with your metadata. It's like metadata about your data that Vanessa normally, right? There's some high level of deletions going on. There's some encryptions that are going on. Remember what that Storm 0501 threat actor does. They encrypt on the endpoint. They encrypt in the OneDrive. So one of the questions that I get asked oftentimes if I get on a call is how long would it take to recover our data, all of our data? And I'm hopeful that if you can utilize as an additional signal for your security team, right, what is happening to your data, that we can lessen that potential dwell time. Because your data, if there's some encryption happening in your OneDrive, if there's some encryption happening on your laptop, right, this along with your other investments with things like CrowdStrike should be able to cause someone to ask this question: is there something happening on Vanessa's machine, on Stephen's machine, right? Versus just letting it go. These things that, I'm trying to remember. There's a guy that created a blog post, and it was about could he remotely encrypt OneDrives without detection, right? Could he do it? And he did. He went ahead and he tested. He wasn't a hacker. He wasn't a criminal. He was trying to prove a point whether or not he could do it, and he could. Which means you need multiple signals in your security posture, right? In what you're looking at, both on the backup data. What are you doing? What's occurred? Are there any issues with that? Absolutely. And what is our data telling us, as well as what is our laptops telling us, or what are our user logins telling us? So data anomalies are one of those additional signals, because there's no place in SharePoint, in OneDrive, that can tell you there's 500,000 files that were encrypted throughout. There's 1,300 out of your 7,200 employees OneDrives that were affected. And remember what OneDrive is. OneDrive isn't just your user file repository. In many cases, it is the place where the attachments are kept for your email. So without your OneDrive, your email is not necessarily whole. So we have to utilize these data anomalies about what our data is telling us. And basically, for our customers that have been backing up for years, they build this pattern down to an object, to my laptop or my OneDrive, right? And that says something is happening. Please go check on this. Right? That's fundamentally what.
Yeah, and I think it's important to highlight as well. We know that this isn't everyone's day job. This is not what they want to be spending their time doing. Again, you want to run your organization, you want to run your business. Again, one of the benefits that we have is being a kind of SaaS solution delivered as a service. This is all supported for you. Again, if we notice things like this across your environment, we'll proactively reach out to you to say, hey, it looks like there's a lot of deletions happening within your account. Is this something you're doing, or could you potentially be under an attack? So by being able to sort of highlight these things to you as soon as possible, it really does kind of limit any potential damage. And going back to what we covered earlier, allow you to sort of get this clean recovery with these processes we have in place too. And brings us on nicely to how we can actually do that.
Yeah, we have to think about this attack in the cyber incident response. So It's not even just the reality of a cyber incident response is that you can rely on a company like Druva, who's in a completely different class of data protection companies, right? Because we look throughout a cyber response for data that you will need, not just the button of recovering. So we have to think about that attack and what data. So during a scope and containment, as an example, how will you, one, know what was affected, two, go and clean it up, right? So even before we recover with our curated snapshot, a OneDrive, we have to, or SharePoint, we have to be able to say, yes, we've deleted that, right? Because like I mentioned, encryption isn't just about a hammer and that everything is going to get encrypted all at once. So if you recover on top of a OneDrive or a SharePoint and you didn't delete that corrupted file, you're just leaving that corrupted file in place as a version. So you have to have a file, you have to have the asset as, I'm going to hand this file over to my PowerShell person, and they're going to go delete those 500,000 files so I can then recover that data. So throughout a cyber incident response, you have a need for different roles have a need for data, right? So utilizing our data anomaly and that model of what my data should be telling me, is good or not, and identifying and having the assets to identify what needs to be cleaned up, the curated snapshot, then to recover, right, back in place, and the data, especially for that last part of a cyber incident response, which is legal and risk management trying to define and answer their questions, which is, what was our exposure? Did we have any sensitive data that was potentially exfiltrated, right? So there's a number of these questions. So yeah, I could talk about this stuff in depth, but we'll continue.
Yeah, and again, we've talked about the anomaly detection, and I kind of touched on it earlier as well. But having this sort of proactive threat defense and what we call managed DDR, which basically gives us the ability to actually help you out if there's any sort of circumstance where we're doing this threat monitoring for you. There's anomaly detection, there's automated backup lockdown, and something we've recently brought in as well is what we call safe mode. And I think this is another benefit for you as an organization where we can help you with this entire process. And Vanessa, as it's something new as well, do you want to touch on the benefits of safe mode and what this means for organizations?
Yeah, safe mode, especially we think about the platform. We have customers that are not just backing up with retention, but they're also segregating their users. North America admins may only have access to that, and they have other admins for Europe and other admins for, let's say Australia. So you have a number of users that can access the environment. And you also have APIs as a simple example, right? The APIs allow us to integrate with Sentinel or even create a custom integration to another application of yours. Some use it for reporting purposes, some use it for process management, some use it for integrations into ServiceNow. Safe mode is simply a button that you predetermined the act, limiting it down to the exact people, stopping the backups, right? Making sure that no one has access to this data, stopping the access to the APIs. All of these buttons that you would have gone through a checklist and maybe you would have forgotten about, but you basically predefine that safe mode, press that button, not necessarily press a button, but the concept of pressing a button, and it does lock it down. Because if your security team is saying we may have an issue, right, you need to have some act to ensure, once again, what can my vendor do to ensure the safety of that data? So when I need it, it will be there. So that's, for me, I think about the general value of the safe mode is like locking it down.
Great, yeah. And sort of tying this all together now and how that kind of comes together with what we've talked about with the backup piece, the recovery, the sort of cyber resilience, the threat monitoring as well. Obviously, data governance compliance is a huge part of this as well.
Yeah, let me, I tend to use this story. I had a customer come up to us at a conference. So they were They backed up their laptops, desktops. And then when they migrated from Google into 365, they started backing up 365 as well. They had a finance admin who was working with the IT leadership on the budget. So that file was emailed over to IT leadership distribution group. And often, as we know, things can get repurposed, and that's what happened. Like a day and a half later, she got an email stating, "Hey, I don't think I should have received this file." And that finance admin wasn't aware that the IT leadership repurposed that distribution group to include their direct reports. So what they did was they not only utilized the data governance, federated search. Tell me, where could this file be? They found that file on two different laptops, two different devices, endpoint devices. So two different users downloaded them. Someone downloaded it and dropped it in their OneDrive, and another person dropped it into a Microsoft Teams, landing it in SharePoint. They not only found the files because, right, you're looking at what you can, where is all this data, and we back up this data. Right? We're backing up devices, we're backing up the full user footprint. And they found all the emails, and they found that one person had forwarded that email outside of that original group. So they utilized features like either quarantine. I think in this case, they utilized what's called defensible deletion. And when you have a robust RBAC, like we do, we can control exactly who can do what with data governance. So they were able to actually pull those files out of the backup. They actually reached into the production and pulled it out of those endpoint devices. Oftentimes, and especially for the laptop, desktop, I talked about the user footprint, but oftentimes without great investment on the Microsoft side for Purview to reach down and be able to tag sensitive data on the laptop, our customers are utilizing the sensitive data governance feature, especially for the laptop desktop. And remember, we have to always think about what these threat actors are doing. That Storm 0501 went to the laptop, read sensitive data, it encrypted the data, and exfiltrated. So if you have no mechanism on your endpoint devices to identify if there's sensitive data, right? How are you going to know what was there? How are you going to help that risk management and legal team understand the what was potentially exfiltrated, and right, what your exposure was? So the concept of data governance on top of your backup data provides more than the insight and the features that you need for just the backup data. Definitely for customers, helps them provide some governance for their laptops and desktops as well, right? That user footprint. So
yeah, and I think
and then there's legal hold.
Yeah, again, I think it is really important to consider all these things. And again, we want to tie this all together and say, like, this is really what our advantage is for Microsoft 365 and some of the other workloads we've mentioned. Is, again, if you want to take anything away from today's session, is like, consider the fact that we've got this always on air gap protection. It's the backup data itself is isolated from your production, and it's isolated in this sort of different backup environment that's also locked down for you as well. And you want to focus on not just recovery, but you want to focus on the ability to do fast, clean, and granular recovery as and when required. And if you are out looking for a backup solution or a data protection solution, you really need to be looking for things like built-in ransomware and threat defense as standard now, because this really is what you're going to need going forward. And obviously on top of that, like Vanessa's just touched on, when it comes to things like long-term retention, compliance, governance, e-discovery, that should also be part of your package as well, because again, there's so much value there in the backup data as well. And there's so many things that can potentially go wrong if people get in and, again, exfiltrate some of this data and trying to delete it or get access to it when they shouldn't have it. So these are all advantages that we can offer. And with that as well, we want to, again, thank everyone for coming today. And I hope this was useful for you, just to kind of give you a high level in terms of what we do. And again, Vanessa, for touching on a lot of these examples and potential red flags that you might have across your organization. So if anyone is interested in learning a bit more, please head over to druva.com. Again, you can start a free trial. You can do a self-service product tour where you can go around and see for yourself. Or if your organization is interested in the sort of maturity model that we mentioned earlier, we can actually walk through your IT and your security teams to see where the potential gaps might be across the organization. But with that, I'll pass back to Doug.
Yeah, that's great. I was hiding on my desk actually for a lot of that presentation. It's interesting. I read that while happily Googling away here, that only 30% of organizations use a third-party backup, and that means 7 out of 10 organizations are relying on effectively what Microsoft provides out of the box. So there's clearly a very large market here, but more to the point, where's the sweet spot that you guys are finding? I mean, what does an organization need to look like in order to think they should probably get to the next level?
I mean, I'll talk about Microsoft data, right? Having migrated organizations from the on-prem world, not even just on-prem SharePoint. And so these are companies that are migrating from file servers that had no data governance before, and they're just bringing over years of data, years of intellectual property. So I think part of that sweet spot is they have to ask internal questions. I think when we go and speak at these conferences, we talk about and promote that collaboration that each department, legal, risk management, security, the collaboration team, the backup team, IT as a whole, they need to ask different questions to understand what's their need, right? What's the need that they have? What data? How are they prepared? Because from a backup and a platform perspective, we've had the benefit of listening to our thousands of customers, and we are maturing every day our platform to answer, a vast array of problems, right? To solve those problems for organization. So I think the sweet spot has to come from every organization's honesty with where they are, what they have, their ability to be able to recover, and what is the impact if we do not have, not even just a prior point. I mean, if we have no point of right, or if we are relying upon Microsoft, and I think the last thing I'll state about that is that we really don't have to go far from the vendor themselves. They're the ones that are telling their customers, you can't rely on version history as a mechanism of cyber recovery. That legal hold, no matter what license you have, that's intended to provide very specific use cases, and its design is to export, right? That there is no backup, and we are being attacked, and our data is getting encrypted. So yeah, that sweet spot definitely is something that's a little bit different for every company.
Well, Stephen, I'm curious about where you're finding people. Are they coming to you having realized they're hacked? Are they coming to you thinking they might have been hacked? Are they coming to you proactively? I mean, where do you find most organizations? Is their hair on fire, or are they more out in front on this sort of thing?
I would say it's a little bit of each, to be honest. I mean, unfortunately, we do get customers who come to us to say, like, hey, the worst has happened. We were maybe using Microsoft, or we had maybe doing scripted type solutions for like, hey, nothing's gone wrong so far, it's working. It's usually when something goes wrong, people reach out to us to say, hey, we need a third party. We need somebody else who's going to be essentially responsible for this for us. And again, with things like we mentioned, the digital defense report, all the things you see in the news every day, this is front of mind for everyone. So people are having more internal conversations to say, like, hey, should we be proactive about this? How can we actually improve what we're doing? And again, we mentioned with the maturity model there, thankfully, a lot more organizations now are thinking about this and trying to identify gaps they might have and get ahead of this, because, again, it's unfortunate to say, but it's more a matter of when things are going to happen now in terms of if. So yeah, everybody has to be prepared for this. And if you can try and get in front of this as soon as possible, it's going to put you in a better place when the inevitable, unfortunately, does happen.
Yeah, Stephen, Vanessa, this was a timely event. We couldn't be happier that you were here and presenting this. Clearly, it's something that everybody should be thinking about, and if you are one of the 7 out of 10 who has not taken the next step, we would encourage you to connect with Druva and have that conversation. Have no doubt that it's easily implemented, and also you get to kind of walk through the many stages that you'll need to take in order to make sure that everything is covered, and ultimately you're not dealing with anything that's going to derail your business going forward, because as we all know and can all see, this is only going to get more complicated, and you really do need that layer of protection that's seeing the sophisticated levels of attack and protecting. So again, thanks very much for being here. Great event, and best of luck for the rest of the year.
Yeah, thanks
Thank
for having us.
Well, there you have it, another solution in our spotlight. We want to thank Druva and Vanessa and Stephen for that presentation, and we appreciate your attendance as well. Until next time, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review. Thanks for watching.
If your business would like to be featured in a future event, contact us today.